I spotted it from the car. Even before we arrived, I could see it from afar. My brother told me I was looking at the biggest and fastest roller coaster in the park. But I wasn't afraid of heights. I'd never been scared of the dark, never backed down from school playground Goliaths. I carried a slingshot in my back pocket because I was the type of girl who would rather lose than quit, rather fail than forfeit. I was not afraid of anything. My aunties and uncles would say that I got it from my mother. They tell stories from when she was younger, from when her dad nicknamed her Mighty Igor, after the world's strongest wrestler. 6'2", weighing in at 288 pounds, a bodybuilding Polish man from Detroit, Michigan. He'd crush his opponents with a bear hug, stop moving cars with his legs, bend iron bars with his hands, break cement blocks on his head with a sledgehammer. Somehow, my mother, a small girl from Lagos, Nigeria, knew how to transform into a heavyweight champion, a giant. And that day, at the fun fair, I was going to become one too. Until I reached the front of the queue and realized there was a problem. I didn't meet the height requirements, I was too small. But to me, all it required was a desire, and I had that. So I came up with a plan to stand on the back of my shoes, tiptoeing past the man at the gate who was too busy checking our tickets to double check my height. All of a sudden, I'd made it to the other side, past the height restrictions that tried to keep me behind. My mother, she sat on my right and instructed me to hold on tight. Before I knew it, we were 200 feet high. Flying at 90 miles per hour, I did not care that my hair had lost all composure as it wrestled with the wind. All I could hear was mine and my mother's screams of excitement. We two giants, taller than we'd ever been before. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the fifth time round, the roller coaster jolted, and I slid out of the carriage. I was no longer sitting beside my mother. I was flying away from her like a bird leaving the nest, but I was not yet ready. My sweaty hands still clutching the safety bar that failed to hold me. My mother, she continued to scream, but this time there was no excitement, only fear. With her right arm, she tried desperately to pull me in, and with her left arm, she cushioned my head as it banged and bled against the carriage. After a few terrifying minutes of dangling 200 feet from the ground, the ride finally ended. I remember my mother being so furious. As soon as she got off the ride, she marched straight to the man at the gate to give him a piece of her mind. And that's when I started to cry. Not because I was hurt or shaken up, but because I felt guilty. I was the only one who knew it was my fault. I was a fraud. I tricked everyone into believing I was bigger than I really was. I'm sure there's a point in everyone's life when they feel like a fraud. They wonder how they got to be where they are, if they deserved to be there, or had they somehow scammed the system into letting them in. But not many people experience this feeling during their first week of university. Freshers Week. I arrive in my university halls, ready to unpack my past and introduce it to my future. I'd never been so far from home, yet so close to finding where I belong. And I couldn't help but wonder if it was with those girls I met in the lift, the ones who live on the second floor. They invited me down for drinks before going out, and I accepted the invitation. We're getting ready. Hand steady as I apply my eyeliner with precision. The girls ask questions. Where are you from? What school do you go? Do you know so-and-so? we exchange A-level results. I tell them about my A star, A. Each letter carries the same weight of pride as it did on results day. Press play. One of the girls puts music on. Another girl changes the song to something she can dance to. And then she asks me if I could teach her how to twerk. She's always wanted to learn, but does not have, in her words, a nigger bum. In that one sentence, I had suddenly shrunk. Despite all of my academic achievements, I had become nothing more than a body, a black body. Or perhaps I was never as big as I claimed to be. And maybe this Russell Group University had certain requirements that I would never meet. I was the only black student on the drama course, studying a degree that failed to teach anything in the history of black theatre or mention any BME writer in 3 years. I wondered if they'd somehow disappeared from the curriculum, or if they were ever let in the first place. But when I asked, I was told that there was simply no space. As an aspiring writer, I began to question my place. I asked myself, how would I ever fit in to an academic institution such as this? Could my plays ever exist in the curriculum? Was this institution, this industry, this roller coaster built with someone like me in mind? Or was I only pretending to be big enough for the ride? Had I lied about my size, just like I did at the fun fair? Once again, I felt like I had deceived everyone. I felt like I needed to apologize for something, for anything, for speaking, for just being there. So I kept my head down. No hanging around after lectures. I spoke less in tutorials, anxious that someone will soon spot the lie, that I didn't speak right, I didn't look like the type, and one day I was going to be found out. It was only a matter of time before I would slip out of the ride. It took me a while to realize that this guilt I carried wasn't mine. It didn't belong to me, because I wasn't the one to blame. The problem was not that I was too small, but that the roller coaster was broken. The ride was faulty. The staff members didn't do their job properly. And that's exactly what we see in the arts industry and in universities across the UK. If you look carefully, you'll discover loose screws and old parts that need changing. You'll see that the roller coaster is broken. I discovered this when I learned what it means to be a token. In academia, it means one lecture, one tutorial, 1 week on black theatre, or one optional black theatre subject that never filters into the core compulsory units, but instead, it sits on the margins like spare parts that are never needed but always included. And on the stage, it looks like one black actor or one black play. And even then, what are we allowed to say? Are we only allowed to critique our own communities? Are we only allowed to be victims? Or are we allowed to just be? Now, there are solutions to the problem. There are initiatives that pave ways for young black creatives to enter traditionally white spaces. But what happens when you come through this entrance and you're immediately met with the question, am I here because I'm black? Or did I take the place of a white person? Suddenly, the pride of being chosen meets the insecurity of being a token. Now, what does this constant self-questioning do for our long-term careers? What effect would it have on my career? Would I let fear and guilt stop me from ever riding a roller coaster again? During my final week at university, I wrote my first one-woman show called Check the Label. It unraveled secrets and stories from my childhood, memories stored up in growing up as a young black girl. And I invited the world to come and listen, and the world came. The performances sold out at the Bristol Old Vic. And each night, while I waited backstage, I became that little girl again, the one who was not afraid of heights, the one who waited in line to ride the biggest and fastest roller coaster in the park. And as I walked onto the stage, I realized I was standing on the back of my shoes again. I had walked past the height requirements, and now I was flying, 90 miles per hour, 200 feet high above the gatekeepers that tried to keep me behind, the ones that told me I was not big enough. And suddenly I understood that sometimes you need to give yourself the boost, to stand on your own two shoes and prove that you are not too small, that you are just as tall as you choose to be, just like the girl who believes she is really a giant. Thank you.